Good evening. We begin tonight with breaking news. In a stunning move, President Donald Trump is now imposing strict censorship, with his statements on Truth Social turning harsh, even revoking broadcast licenses for media outlets reporting critically on the U.S.-Iran war. Why has President Trump suddenly imposed this strict censorship? What is actually being hidden? And is this related to the condition of American military bases after being attacked by Iranian proxies? In this segment, we will break down what America is actually hiding from this conflict. Before we discuss what the United States is actually hiding, we first need to understand why Donald Trump suddenly chose the path of strict media censorship. The signs, in fact, had already appeared. Conan, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States, had emphasized that Iran is far from defeated, not even weakened, but is in fact growing. This is an important point, and this is what is being withheld from the public. On the other hand, there is a domestic factor. The majority of American citizens do not actually want a prolonged war. This then became a major political pressure. To suppress it, Trump began threatening media outlets that broadcast negative narratives about the conflict. Even access to satellite imagery of the Middle East region was also restricted. None of this is a coincidence. This is an effort to control perception. Because if the public knew that their bases were vulnerable to attack, the impact would not just be military, but also political. And this is just the beginning. We will break it down one by one. Several leaked reports are beginning to show a very different picture from the official narrative of the United States. Attacks from Iran and its proxy groups, using both drones and missiles, were not just minor disturbances. We start with the Al Dhafra air base. The videos that have circulated so far only show attacks from a long distance, which are difficult to verify. But high-resolution satellite imagery is beginning to reveal a deeper truth. Aircraft hangars were damaged, military buildings were destroyed, and strategic facilities appeared to be directly impacted. These are not just claims. This is visual evidence that is starting to build. More importantly, the targets were not random. There are strong indications that communication centers and vital infrastructure were targeted, not just ordinary buildings. In Iraq, the situation is not much different. The Victoria military base near Baghdad airport was reportedly attacked with rockets and drones by pro-Iran militias. Circulating videos show large fires, with flames soaring high and thick smoke blanketing the surrounding area. Reports state that this attack hit important points within the base, not empty areas. Then in Bahrain, satellite imagery from Planet Labs and Airbus, analyzed by the New York Times, shows something that is difficult to dispute: real damage at a main U.S. naval base. Some buildings even appear to be missing from their original structures, leaving clear marks visible from above. Iranian drones also hit the protective radar dome at the headquarters of the United States Fifth Fleet. In Kuwait, Camp Arifjan was also a target. Iran released satellite imagery showing the impact points. What was hit was the radome, the protective cover for the military communication system. According to Iran's claim, there were 6 units. These are not random targets. Inside the radome are radar, data systems, and coordination centers. If one is damaged, it might still be manageable. But if several are affected at once, the disruption begins to be felt systemically. The attacks also reached Saudi Arabia. At Prince Sultan Air Base, one building was seen completely destroyed. Meanwhile, at Al Udeid, 2 important points were impacted. In the north, the satellite communications sector, and in the south, the command center. This is not a coincidence. In Jordan, what was hit was even more crucial. The AN/TPY-2 radar, a main part of the THAAD defense system. In satellite imagery, this object appears destroyed. Without its radar, even the most advanced system will lose its optimal detection capability. The pattern is becoming increasingly clear. The targets are specific: command and control. If communication is disrupted, the flow of information is choked. If the command center is hit, the decision-making process slows down. And when these 2 functions are disrupted simultaneously, the impact is not just local. It affects the entire base's operations. All of this leads to one conclusion. These were not random attacks, but a carefully calculated operation. And now we arrive at a much bigger question. After all this has happened, what is the impact for America? In the short term, these attacks may seem contained, but in the long term, the impact could be far greater. Why? Because this is not just about physical damage. This is about a shift in the balance of power. First, the impact does not stop at infrastructure damage. It has now affected personnel. Around 19 United States soldiers were transferred to Germany, not for a routine rotation, but for serious medical treatment. And this is not the first incident. This war is also beginning to show a much higher cost, according to Al Jazeera. Up to the 16th day of the conflict, March 15th, 2026, at least 2,331 people have been killed. The highest number of casualties occurred in Iran and Lebanon. This figure does not include more than 23,000 wounded, which shows a scale of impact far wider than what is visible on the surface. On the other hand, there is unusual movement. American warships have begun to move away from the conflict zone. Reports have even emerged that not a single ship is within a radius of hundreds of kilometers from the battle area. If this is true, it is not just a repositioning. It is a signal of a major change. For decades, the aircraft carrier has been a symbol of American dominance, always at the forefront. But now, this symbol is retreating. And when that happens, the trust of allies begins to waver. The evidence was seen when America tried to form a coalition to secure the Strait of Hormuz. The response was far from solid. Countries like Spain, Germany, Italy, Australia, and Japan actually refused. Some only offered partial support, and many chose to remain silent. One of the main reasons is the enormous cost of the war. The United States has reportedly already spent more than $23 billion. Losses also came from the destruction of the AN/TPY-2 radar in the THAAD system in the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, with a value reaching approximately $2 billion. And at this point, the question begins to change. It is no longer about who is attacking, but who is starting to lose control. For Iran, this is not just a military attack. It is a narrative victory. Media outlets close to Iran are beginning to build a story that they have successfully breached American defenses, that a great power like America is not entirely untouchable. But it would be a mistake to think this is just part of a propaganda narrative. If we look deeper, these are not just ordinary attacks. This is part of a rather systematic Iranian strategy. They are trying to blind the United States defense systems by first destroying radar installations. After that, waves of relatively cheap and simple missiles and drones are sent to various targets. The goal is clear: to exhaust and weaken the air defense interceptor systems, and the impact is beginning to be felt. America, the Gulf states, and even Israel itself are now facing immense pressure from an unprecedented interceptor missile crisis. This is no longer about attacks, but a war of attrition that tests logistics and long-term readiness. On the other hand, the signals from Tehran are becoming firmer. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, along with leadership figures like Ayatollah Khamenei, delivered a strong message. Iran does not want this conflict to end anytime soon. They want to teach a lesson so that the opponent will not dare to attack again. This means it is not just a retaliation, but an effort to build a long-term deterrent effect. However, what is visible on the surface may only be a small part of the story. Attack after attack continues to occur. Bases are hit, facilities are damaged, and the intensity is not decreasing, but rather tends to be consistent. But the official numbers are almost never truly clear. There are no complete details on casualties, no full reports on the scale of the damage. The information that gets out is very limited, as if strictly filtered before it reaches the global public. And at this point, we return to where we started. Why are Donald Trump and his allies so strictly controlling information? Perhaps because what is at stake is not just the war, but the image of power itself. And if this image collapses, the impact could be far greater than any single military attack.